If you like to make your NFL games a little bit more interesting, you've come to the right place. It's the Even Money Podcast with Ross Tucker and Steve Fezzik.
Yeah, Vegas, baby. Vegas. It is the Even Money Podcast, and it's also the Fantasy Feast Podcast. We talked about it last week, kind of teased it a little bit. We are doing it this week. We've got both Steve Fezzik from the Even Money Podcast, as well as my guy, John Daigle from the Fantasy Feast Podcast. Let's eat, baby, in the house. You know why? Because John is like the best NFL draft prop bet guy out there, which is why you should be listening and or watching the Fantasy Feast Podcast if you don't already. And we love to pick his brain on the Even Money Podcast every year. Now it just so happens that he's the co-host on the Fantasy Feast Podcast. So I don't even know what expression you're allowed to use now, but we're doing whatever with two birds, okay, at the same time. I don't know. Are you allowed to say kill two birds with one stone anymore? Or is that, what do you say instead?
You just did, so we're allowed to say it.
All right. You got to check both these guys out on social media. Steve, of course, the only two-time winner of the Super Contest at Fezzik Sports on social media. Been getting your emails and love them. Remember to take advantage of any of our sponsors you ever hear on any of these shows, but especially Monarch Money, and forward it to me after you sign up. Ross@rosstucker.com. Your question to Steve will go to the very top of the list. And you know what? We don't do it enough on the Fantasy Feast Podcast. You can ask questions for John, too, about your dynasty team or your best ball draft or whatever. John can do that on the Fantasy Feast Podcast as well. Check out John at NotJDaigle. Of course, a lot of you love that you check us out, youtube.com/RossTuckerNFL. I am Ross Tucker, at Ross Tucker NFL on social media. We're at Ross Tucker Pod. And I do have one draft prop bet I'm in on. I'm curious. We'll find out a little bit later in the show from Steve and John how they feel about it. But I posted this on social media. I'm in on the over 6.5 offensive linemen in the first round. Plus money, plus 135. We need that to happen. I just like having a rooting interest during the draft. And I can root for offensive linemen. We can all root for offensive linemen. I will be doing a live draft watch party Thursday night and putting out some content from that, by the way. All right, so we spoke basically, Steve, at length last week about how the draft is not what it used to be. John, I want to get your thoughts on that because it was only a couple years ago, where we were cleaning up on the draft. Now, it's always been the case in Pennsylvania, I can't bet on the draft. Steve said the lines, have they come out yet, Steve, in Vegas?
Still waiting for the Westgate. I'm not optimistic. Circa $300 limit and huge differences in the bid and the ask. What do I mean by that? You could have a dude that's like at 18.5 is under, might be minus 175, is over plus 125. So, no thanks. Vegas wants no part of this draft. I blame the old school dyno bookmakers. For years, what they would do is John Daigle would come to the window and he'd make a bet on some dude to like go over 17.5, and they'd move the line from minus 110 to minus 120 when they should have been moving it to minus 160 based upon a sharp betting something. They had no idea how to book the draft, and they took their ball and they went home instead of learning.
So I guess I understand it, but people want to bet the draft, John. Like, people want to bet the draft, and it's an enjoyable event to bet, usually because you usually do pretty well with it. I would think that especially one of these newer books or smaller, I guess nobody wants to lose money, but you would think just the marketing part of it, Steve, like just to say, hey, we're betting the draft, come just to get people to sign up.
Absolutely. And Vegas has shifted from being willing to have a sports book that was a loss leader to bring people in. And the sports books never made any money in Vegas. They basically turned a small profit, and it brought customers in. And now every single part of the casino has to be a profitable part, meaning not just that they win, but they make more money than the slot machines would make in their places. And that has doomed a lot of the poker rooms in Vegas, and it's doomed a lot of the sports books.
Interesting. All right, John, you sent me an email. You got all kinds of props that you're loving, that you're all over. You're in a place where you can bet them, and look, you were already placing bets on the draft like 3 weeks ago.
Months ago, actually. And that's only because, as Steve said, as you mentioned, as the books continue to protect themselves rather than allow the bettors to have fun, especially if you're a good bettor. What did happen in Illinois, since I'm based out of Chicago, is that draft props, or props that had roster changes involved, which is what draft props are, were actually illegal as of the new year. But then February, they went back on that rule and allowed draft prop betting. So I don't know how many more seasons I'm going to be able to do it here in Chicago, but at least for now, I can still go to the DraftKings kiosk and not get limited there.
Ooh, okay. And so what about, that's awesome, but Steve talks about this all the time. I know you watch or listen to the show, John. He talks about, getting the value early, because there was 2 weeks ago where you were already on Fantasy Feast talking about some of the draft props that you liked and that the lines had changed quickly on some of them. Before we get into what you have today, can you refresh our memory on some of the lines that were way off when they first came out? Because I remember you saying on Fantasy Feast that, well, there's still value there, or I would still bet that, but a bunch of them, the value had come and gone, like Steve and I talk about on Tuesdays during the season when we're betting the lines.
There were a couple, like Matthew Golden, first wide receiver taken, and that was only plus 300, but now Matthew Golden's the favorite to be drafted as the first wide receiver ahead of Ted McMillan. There was also...
Hold on a second. So what would be his number for first receiver taken now?
Last I checked, I believe it's minus 130, minus 135. Wow. So
Steve,
that's not going to be mentioned on today's show, by the way, just because we got the bad number. Worst end of
No, I know, but I'm just curious. So, Steve, John got Matt Golden at plus 300 to be the first receiver taken. Now it's minus 130. How much value is that? Give me the math on that, the money.
Well, he's basically getting 3-1 on something that let's say he bet it 4 times. All right, now he'd be unhappy to go 2-2. All right, but if he goes 2-2, he risks 4 units, so he's going to win 4 units. If he's unlucky, he's going to win 4 units. So his ROI is north of 100%. It's probably like 120%. Put this in perspective. This would be like betting Colorado playing at the New York Yankees, all right? And you're getting the Yankees plus 300. That's a good bet.
Yes, very good bet. All right, go ahead, John.
But the others we have, like Raiders to take an offensive line, it was 60-1, I believe it was, a month and a half ago. Now that's been bet down to that's the second favorite position that they're going to be drafting. And there's still some live numbers we'll talk about on the show today. I just wanted to make sure that we gave everyone the most up-to-date information on today's show.
Love it. Okay, where are we starting?
Let's begin smallest to largest. So let's go ahead and begin with Kelvin Banks Jr. to be drafted top 10 at plus 150. We'll get into long shots later. I know everyone's looking for longer than that, but plus 150 to me, I'm still very confident in, given the outs Kelvin Banks Jr. has at tackle. This is a class for everyone who's just now tuning in this week to the NFL draft, where it is basically guards that the NFL GMs are going to draft and attempt to stretch out to play the left and right side of the line, just given their arm length. And the players who profile most likely to be able to start at tackle immediately are, in order, Will Campbell, Armand Membu, and Kelvin Banks Jr. And I don't think the books are pricing it like that, given that Kelvin Banks is going to be a 21-year-old starter in week 1, was a 5-star recruit initially, and then did show the longest wingspan of any tackle at the combine this year. He has so many outs between even the Raiders starting at number 6 overall, the Jets, of course, the Saints if they don't want to protect their offensive line because they're not comfortable drafting a quarterback at number 9, the Panthers inside the top 10 because Taylor Moton's last year of his contract has already been mentioned ominously by head coach Dave Canales, and of course the Bears if they want to beef up the left side of their line. So I think there's so many outs for Banks Jr. to get drafted inside the top 10, plus odds are still favorable here.
Ooh, okay. I like that one. That would be good for my 6.5 over 6.5 offensive linemen if we got 3 tackles.
Let's pump the brakes on this, Ross. He has a 100% chance to be picked in the first round. So it's not going to impact your 6.5 bet, I would argue, at all.
Well, no. My point would be, Steve, if 3 go in the top 10, I think it's more likely that 4 go in the next 22 picks. If Banks doesn't go till 14 or 18, then it makes my over 6.5 less likely.
I think that's a good point. Okay, I will absolutely agree with that. I do think like Sanders falling out of the top 10 helps betting other players to go in the top 10 as well. So I like that as well. And I like this as a very safe pick. So any NFL team that selects him in the top 10 is never going to be like in jeopardy of being second guessed for a poor choice.
And it's plus money. All right, what's next?
You cannot get Matthew Golden at plus odds to be the first wide receiver drafted, but you can still get Ted McMillan at plus odds, plus 160, to be the second wide receiver drafted at DraftKings. And so that's the way I'm going to play it instead. It seems like a mismanagement by the books that they would, even if you look at Golden's second wide receiver drafted odds, is plus 120. I'd rather just play it the other way since Emeka Egbuka is still considered a long shot to be the second wide receiver drafted on night 1. So I'm still comfortable playing Ted McMillan, second wide receiver, plus 160.
All right, guys, I told you about this before. Not only do we help you win money here on the Even Money podcast, we help you manage your money to improve your bankroll, which is very, very important, especially with all the volatility and the stock, everything going crazy. Listen, check out Monarch Money, okay? If you use the code EVEN at monarchmoney.com, you get half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code EVEN. I just like the reporting capabilities. I just like being able to see everything that we're spending money on, whether it's like my wife's retail therapy, eating out way too much. It is awesome. It breaks it all down for you and gives you a perfectly clear financial picture. Use code EVEN at monarchmoney.com. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code EVEN. Thursday night, 3rd and Spruce. It's the Labatt Light Watch Party. I cannot wait. Talk about getting cool stuff for what I was going to be doing anyway. Watching the draft, drinking beer. That's what you guys can do with Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt. Head to the website, snap a photo of your receipt, upload it instantly to rack up points for exclusive merch. Hopefully I'll see a bunch of you 3rd and Spruce in Reading Thursday night for the first round of the draft. I will be drinking Labatt or Labatt Blue Light. I haven't decided yet. Maybe I'll alternate. Buy beer, get gear. Go to rewards.labattusa.com to sign up. I don't know what happened there. I need to talk to some people there because it was like top 5, top 10, clearly the number 1 receiver for so long. And then Golden runs a fast 40, and now all of a sudden he might not be. The thing I don't like about that is, like, you're not picking him to be top 2, right? Like, he's got to be the second one picked.
And there is a curveball because we are getting some late smoke here for the Jaguars that Mason Graham may not be the pick. It actually may be Ted McMillan, since the $10 million they gave Diami Brown to be the outside receiver to Brian Thomas, that was just a 1-year deal. Not to mention that McMillan's comp is usually Mike Evans by front offices, and Liam Cohen obviously coached Mike Evans just last year. And so McMillan at number 5 overall is still something that could happen. He could be the first wide receiver drafted, but I believe I heard behind the scenes that he's one of those guys who did not interview very well, and it was considered a red flag. So that's what was detrimental to the process for him.
Let
Steve,
me ask
I'm
you
curious. I was gonna say, Steve, I'm curious. I'm guessing you don't like specific spots like that, like the second wide receiver taken, right?
I know I'm fine when there's a big disparity between where these dudes are expected to go. I don't like it when there's four guys that are all over, their over-unders are all within a couple, because then the curveballs could come in when everyone else is far apart. I actually love it because what John's doing, he's basically using Golden as a proxy for McMillan's odds, with one rising and one falling. I'll say this. I can't see any world where Jacksonville would ever take a McMillan, and here's why. So Jacksonville obviously took Lawrence, and Lawrence was famous for taking Sunday and going to Sunday brunch with his girlfriend and not watching football. And he's been not a bust, but a big disappointment. So now you got, what I've heard, McMillan's a guy that doesn't love football, doesn't watch football, and the like. Is this not a carbon copy of Lawrence? And I don't want somebody like that. I want a guy like Bo Nix that just has no life and just watches football and has duct tape in his travel bag and is just living, breathing, eating the game.
Interesting. There's some rumors about Ashton Genty there at 5'2" to the Jaguars as well, which would be fascinating. All right, what's next, John?
The Genty rumors, I still believe, are the bait that the Jaguars are trying to set for the Bears to trade ahead of the Raiders, because everyone's assuming the Raiders are going to take Genty. I'm still not sure that's going to be their pick, quite honestly, but I think the league believes the Raiders are going to take Genty. Moving on, though, drafted in the first round, Texas A&M edge Nick Scorton at plus 240. This is one I'm very confident in, just given the run of edge players are going to see in this draft. His ceiling starts at number 11 overall to the 49ers. His floor goes all the way to the Eagles at number 32. And it's just the fact that all these teams did their diligent work on Shamar Stewart, going to be picked somewhere mid-first round. And of course, his teammate at A&M just last year was Nick Scorton, who, when then the coaches go back and look, was a 19-year-old team captain at Purdue who led the Big Ten in sacks and pressures at that age. He took on a lot of double teams playing across from Stewart last year, which then allowed an athletic specimen like Stewart to roam free. So I just think it's a guy that, especially at that youth and has that type of production, is going to stand out for a lot of teams who need help in the running game. I'm going to personally pick Washington to select him, but first round in my eyes, I'm very confident in at plus 240.
I love everything about Scorton. I'm a little bit surprised that his odds are plus 240. Mm-hmm. I guess he's not necessarily the physical measurables that maybe you want or what some of these other guys have, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of Brandon Graham, who the Eagles just had for the last 15 years. He's got the inside-outside versatility. That might be my favorite one you have so far, John. Any thoughts, Steve?
I have nothing on him, but the logic is completely sound here. And let's face it, too, I always like betting over-unders on where a dude is going to go, all right? So I haven't been following, where he's rising or falling. But whenever you a guy that's right around 32 and the money's, or maybe a little bit higher, and then the money's coming on him, to go earlier in the draft, it becomes a great proxy to play him, in the first round.
What's next, John?
Total running backs selected in the first round over 2.5 at plus 220. We're getting enough smoke this close to the draft that Trevion Henderson is becoming someone that either the Broncos or Commanders could be interested in ahead of or just around Omari and Hampton, that it does seem like we could possibly, at least at these odds, squeeze 3 running backs into night one, especially if we believe the quarterbacks dip out of the first round altogether. We are finding out so many teams do not have first round grades on Shadur Sanders. Jackson Dart has personally backed out of going to the draft because he doesn't believe he's going on night one. And so there are some positions here to fill in. And I think Henderson could potentially be one of those. At plus 220, I will say I will at least take those odds that it happens.
We are almost there. Almost time for the number one overall pick with the NFL draft. How about Smirnoff? That's been my number one overall pick for vodka for a long time because it's perfect for crafting delicious cocktails. I'm big into like Smirnoff and like any type of recovery drink, like hydration drink. Any type of mixture like that, that's been big for me these days. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. It is the world's number one vodka. It's an official vodka partner of the NFL, and there is no debate. It's my number one draft pick when it comes to vodka. So, what are his odds to go in the first round? Do you know?
That is a good one, but I did not take it because I know it's worse than the plus 220 I saw.
Worse than the plus 220, yeah. I mean, I think there are going to be 3 running backs go. That would be one I would bet. I think there will be 3 running backs. I think Travion Henderson goes because people are looking at him like a Jahmyr Gibbs, that he has that kind of juice. Mm-hmm. So that's my 2 favorite ones you have so far, John, are the last 2 to get plus 200 something on Scorton in the first round and 3 running backs in the first round. Anything, Steve?
Let me ask John, everyone's bullish on Henderson, and I like that. Is there any chance Hampton could fall out of the first round? It would be very unlikely, right?
I don't think so. I still think he's the better player. I think teams are viewing Henderson, though, as the better fit for their offenses. I think Hampton is still the better 3-down back. And there's still a chance he goes to the Broncos, but perhaps Sean Payton prefers Henderson, and that leaves Hampton open for, oddly, like my next bet, the Steelers or the Commanders. But I don't think Hampton falls out of the first round at all.
Tell me about your next bet.
And that is a long shot. One I'm not even confident in, but with the number at plus 700, I'd say, okay, I understand how wild this first round can get. And that is the Steelers' position of first drafted player running back, again, plus 700. Where they get the quarterback if they go running back in the first round, I still have no idea. After they give DK Metcalf $150 million, and as of now, we're starting Mason Rudolph in week 1. The Steelers also don't pick again until round 3, but it's still an Arthur Smith offense that, in my opinion, will not utilize a satellite back like Jalen Warren comfortably as their RB1. And so if they are not comfortable with these quarterbacks in the first round, Shadur Sanders included, then I would imagine running back is the next priority there. So either Amarian Hampton or Travion Henderson, I could also see landing with the Steelers, again, a long shot plus 700.
I love that. I love that pick. It's either quarterback or running back in my mind for the Steelers at 21. Speaking of running backs, you got a real long shot as it relates to Ashton Genty you got to tell me about.
Ashton Genty to be drafted by the Saints at plus 2,000. You're not getting the best number, unfortunately, because this was plus 9,000 as of a month ago. But we've seen, despite the Derek Carr news that he may not play half the season at all this year, he basically has only 1 year left on his deal anyhow for the Saints. The Saints also have offensive line issues to address, but we now understand that the Saints are going best player available, and they are not comfortable with a quarterback, at least as it stands of Tuesday, at number 9 overall. So much so that I believe their board goes Cam Ward and then Tyler Shuck as the number 2 quarterback, and number 9 is too rich for Louisville quarterback Tyler Shuck. And so if it comes to push to shove and the Raiders do not take Ashton Genty, I believe Genty will then be on the board there for the Saints to take, and I cannot imagine they go a tackle over Genty if they're going best player available. Again, it's a long shot at plus 2,000, but I just think the dominoes could fall to the point where the Saints say, this is the best player available, we are taking him, and we will figure out the rest later.
Steve, you texted me before the show started. You kind of like the over quarterbacks, is that right?
I kind of did, but I'm going to defer to John. Hey, that's the beauty. I did like that. I'm not going to give that out. John made some good points about Like, listen. All it takes is one team to like Dart, and he goes. And the one thing about these quarterbacks, even if you have concerns about a quarterback, a good starting quarterback. Look at Bo Nix. He's worth 3 points for your team versus some backup quarterback that you got to throw out there, and you don't have to pay him nothing. So it's so valuable to get a bargain at quarterback on the rookie contract deal that teams stretch tremendously. But the bottom line is, I agree. There's only one quarterback worthy of going in the first round, so it really is a leap of faith that 3 will be selected. So I'm going to pass on it.
And to be fair, I don't know either. I did a mock draft on the Established to Run podcast feed for everyone with some of the sharpest mockers who've ever been doing this, including Ben Standig, Scott Smith of 4for4 Football. And we had a conversation once we stopped recording yesterday, and all of us agreed, like, we don't know about the quarterback situation. I think we're settling on 2 right now, but even 2 seems like it would take the Vikings or Rams getting out of the first round for that second quarterback domino to fall. So it's just a point that no one knows right now.
Well, you still could have the Saints take 1 at 9 and the Steelers at 21, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's the common logic, although all the Saints beat writers are very convinced that quarterback is not the pick at number 9 overall.
That's interesting. Although maybe that's what the Saints have been telling those guys.
Sure.
Because they don't want someone to jump ahead of them like Andy Reid did for Patrick Mahomes, whatever year that was.
Yeah.
Do you have any others, John? We got about a minute left.
Have one more for everyone, and that is the Bills' position of first drafted player being wide receiver at plus 650. I'm convinced it's a wide receiver or a cornerback for Buffalo, and wide receiver is interesting just because they drafted Keon Coleman last year, and even so, went out and traded for Amari Cooper. And now that they lost both Amari Cooper and say what you will about Matt Collins, he was an important part of their wide receiver rotation, they still need that guy to get downfield. That could be a trade up for Matthew Golden. That could be if they want yards after the catch, instead secretly like piling on Luther Burden in the back end of the first round. But whatever the case, there is a rotation that's missing a player here given those absences. So wide receivers live at plus 650.
Check these guys out on social media. They do an absolute fantastic job. At Fezzik Sports, at Not J Daigle. We've never done this before. It's an Even Money Fantasy Feast simulcast. Hopefully you guys liked it. Definitely check out the other show from time to time if you don't already, whether it's the audio podcast or youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Good luck, everybody. Hope you guys win some money on the draft. We'll recap it next week.
Thanks for tuning in to Even Money. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.